say you get a yurt or, there's all kinds of crazy things that people love the experience. And even a teepee. I don't know if you've ever searched teepees for Airbnbs, but they are a hot commodity on Airbnb. You like just put up a teepee in the pasture and people will go nuts over it. I mean, there are so many different things. And I think we sometimes get so tunnel vision within the agriculture industry that we don't think about all the resources we have and just how you can utilize them in different ways to make extra income, because we all know margins are tight. Record high inputs for 2024 and now going into 2025. Every little bit counts, and it's like the Airbnb is my salary, and I can still do what I love every day, take care of the cattle, build fence, whatever I need to do, and still host people on our operation.
Hey, I'm Shaye Koester-Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Alrighty, folks, this morning we are visiting with Lettie Nickell about creating alternative revenue streams that fit ranch life. Lettie, like many young ranchers, needed to find a way to create income, and when she returned to her family operation, what existed couldn't really support another person or family, so instead of relying on scaling, she started selling beef, turned a grain bin into an Airbnb, and has a wedding venue and community event space for rent. So she's going to talk all about this with us. Now, remember, the best way to support podcasts is to leave a rating and review and share with a friend. With that, let's visit with Lettie. Increased profitability and informed management decisions go hand in hand. Herd Dog is a data analytics company that makes it possible for cattle producers to collect herd information efficiently. Their smart ear tag monitors cattle 24/7. Think of it as a Fitbit for cattle. Herd Dog fits the needs of a variety of operations as it finds sick animals days before humans can detect illness and can identify which cows are in heat. Best of all, the tags have high visibility lights to help you sort out which cattle you are looking for. Head to their website, which is linked in the show notes, or contact them for a consultation to see how Herd Dog can work for you. Herd Dog is spelled HERDDOGG. All right. Well, Lettie, thank you for joining me here this morning. I am super excited to see you again, even if it's not in person, but have you on the podcast, because I've been following you on social media for a while, and what you've done for your family's operation and yourself is something I think a lot of other people would find value in trying to personalize and emulate on their own operations. So thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm so excited to be here this morning.
So before we kind of dive into the topic at hand, which is, for those listening, is kind of going to be Airbnbs and alternative revenue for family operations. Lettie, I'm curious, why do you choose to bet on the beef industry every day?
Why do I choose to bet on the beef industry every day? Well, I think the first thing is just the people within the industry. It's second to none. Some of the best people you'll ever meet and ever interact with, and that's probably the biggest reason. But then also just like the sustainability aspect. And it goes like, we're in the food business. At the end of the day, we're putting food on people's plate, and that's never going to go away. People are always going to be hungry. People are always going to need food, always going to need a high quality protein. And that's two of the reasons why I bet on the beef industry every day. So
awesome. So tell me a little bit about what led you to starting an Airbnb. And I think that's where you're recording right now, correct?
Yeah, I am actually. It's like the only quiet place in our home. So it kind of turns into my office whenever somebody's not staying in there. Yeah, I am recording in the grain bin. It's a converted grain bin. So I went to school at TCU, ranch management, and then after that I was in the feed yard industry for a couple of years, and I realized I needed to eventually come back home to the family operation. My dad's health wasn't in the best condition. He just went through chemo and radiation, and I knew I needed to return back home to be able to help him more, and I had to make a jump, kind of leave my corporate salary and figure out a way to come back to our family operation. And it wasn't quite big enough to bring another salary home, if that makes sense. So I had to get creative, and I originally started selling beef, and I still sell beef on the side, but really I looked at the needs of my area. And we didn't really have a good hotel. We have a hotel, but it's not something I would want to stay in per se. The hotel is not the best, it's very much a small town hotel. So I wanted to create a space where people could come and visit their family if they're coming for the holidays or needing a place to stay overnight or whatever it might be. So it originally started out Airbnb being my house. This was before I was married, before I had kiddos or anything like that. So I would go stay with my parents whenever someone rented my house. And I didn't, you're young, you don't have a lot of personal items that really they matter, but not a huge, it's just at the end of the day, it's things. So I'd go and I'd run over, stay at my parents' house, and little did I know I was going to be kicked out of my house like 3 out of the 4 weeks of the month. And so I was like, okay, this is a need in my area. And I knew I was eventually going to transition into something else. So I started looking at the structures we had on our operation. Like, what are we not utilizing that I could convert into like a cheap space, upscale space, So I had this grain bin on my property, and I was like, I'm just going to turn this grain bin into an Airbnb. And it kind of went along with the wedding venue. And I didn't think I would get the Airbnb up and running as quickly as I did, just capital and investment, stuff like that. The one site we had the Airbnb or the wedding venue going online. About a year later, we finished a grain bin and turned it into an Airbnb. So, and it helps. It provides additional income to your operation, whether it's booked a week and a month or 3 out of the 4 weeks of a month. It just depends on the season and kind of what's going on. But it's all additional revenue to our operation, and it really doesn't take. I also created it to make sure it was going to fit my schedule. We're busy farming and ranching most of the time. We don't have time to clean 24/7 or host all the time, especially during calving season, the busy seasons. So I created a small space for it to, like, it only requires me an hour of my time to clean usually. And that helps a lot. It's not a big extravagant space that goes a lot of additional work into it. So that's kind of the story on why I started an Airbnb and how it kind of fell into my lap. I never saw myself having an Airbnb, but I just saw the need in my area, and that's kind of where it birthed at.
So what is driving people to your area that this has become so successful? Because that's one thing I wonder. I think about where I'm at, and I think, okay, so during hunting season, I could definitely see something like that going over well, but other times of the year, I kind of question it. So what's driving people to your area?
For sure. I live in a very desolate area. Like, the nearest Walmart is 80 miles away. Denver's 5 hours, Wichita's 4, Amarillo's 3.5. So it's very remote where I'm at. And I kind of thought the same thing. I'm like, what in the world are people going to be coming to my area for? And it's definitely busier during hunting season, deer season, that kind of stuff, bird season. We do have more bookings then. But a lot of times it's just people stopping through, like just needing a stop before I go to Colorado Springs or Denver or to the mountains, wherever they might be traveling from, or vice versa. They're going back home, and we're kind of a nice in-between spot. There's not a lot of Airbnbs. There's not a lot of hotels to stop and stay. And a lot of this attraction, because it's a glorified glamping experience, so there's no bathroom in the grain bin. You have access to a bathroom in the Round Top, which is right next door. So we advertise it as a glamping experience, and we get a lot of outdoorsy people. And over the years, that's kind of where it started, but it's evolved to so much more now. And I don't know if that's pertaining to the marketing I've been doing on social media with the Airbnb, but a lot of people are craving getting away from the city. They're craving getting back to the roots of outdoors and seeing a ranch or a farm in action, or waking up to cows in the backyard. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we'll have people even from Garden City come down for a date night, or Liberal or Dodge City or Lamar, Colorado. And they're not big cities. They have a Walmart, but they're not your Denvers. They're not your Wichitas. So it's been really interesting to see that shift over the last 4 years.
So talk a little bit about the marketing side and how much you have to do there. Is it something where you've pretty much put it on the Airbnb site and it's up, or what else do you have to do in addition to that to make sure that people are finding it?
Yes. So originally I just strictly had it on the Airbnb app and I talk about it on my Instagram stories. Other than that, I didn't really do any marketing for it at all, sharing reels on Instagram, any of that per se. And then this past year I really focused on, well, maybe I do need to market a little bit more to make it easier accessible for other people to find it. So I started sharing on Instagram about it more and kind of the story behind it. And I wish I could have some hard data like, oh, you heard about us on Instagram. Oh, cool. And then you found us on Airbnb. But I don't have any hard data, so I can't tell you if that's helped, if that's indirectly helped with more Airbnb bookings or not. But I think truly like a lot of it is just people find us on the app. I never really have people, oh, we saw you on Instagram and wanted to come stay. I think there's been one or two who have, specifically told me that. But overall, it's more just, I think, just being on the Airbnb app and people pulling up, just like when you're going to a place, you pull up on the app, oh, where can I stay? What's around there?
Mm-hmm.
And you start. I think that's mainly the organic marketing, I should say.
It sounds like you kind of host guests when they're there. So do you want to share more about the interaction you have with people when they stay at your grain bin?
Of course. When I first started, I didn't really do any hosting. I don't know if it was just out of my comfort zone, out of my element. I'm not really sure. But as it's evolved, people really want that connection and they want to talk to you. Like, you host a unique space and it's very different from your modern Airbnbs. Like, it's just not a house. It's a grain bin. There's art in here. There's architecture. Like, there's a lot of design and creativity in there. And people want to talk about it. They were like, how in the world did you come up with this? Or what? How did you think about doing this or whatever? So that is where the hospitality part came in, is like, okay, these people do actually want to interact with me. And some people don't at all, so it's kind of up to what they would like their experience to be. But I always make it personable. Or try to make it personal. Like, we have eggs, we have chickens. Most farmers and ranchers have chickens. Just creating like a breakfast burrito with your homegrown eggs. Like, that is top of the line customer service, because people don't get to experience that every day. So we take it for granted because we're used to having homegrown eggs in our backyard, so just something simple like that, leaving them in the fridge for them to warm up in the morning. Especially during the weekends, I really started doing it mainly because most of our restaurants are closed on the weekends in town. So I wanted them to be able to have something on their way through and not have to go to town or the gas station to grab something. So it's just a personal touch for them, and it leaves them feeling seen and welcomed. And sometimes we'll drop off cookies. Like, we had a bunch of people over the holidays on Christmas Eve, so we made a cute note that said, oh, cookies for Santa. So just different things like that, depending on the season of the year. It really adds a personal touch and leaves people talking about their experience.
Are you feeling stuck with your podcast? Are you putting in endless effort only to feel like you're spinning your wheels? It's time for a breakthrough. Join myself and Krista Paffrath for the Podcast Refresh Workshop. This is a transformative 3-day virtual event designed for podcasters in the rural, western, and agriculture spaces. You'll discover how to reignite your purpose and create content that resonates, streamline your workflow for less stress and more impact, promote confidently to grow your audience, monetize effectively and turn your passion into a profit. We do all this with large group discussions, small breakouts, personalized guidance, and you're going to leave with a clear strategy and blueprint to give you the excitement and resources to thrive in 2025. It's time to refresh, refocus, and feel inspired about podcasting again. You can join us today using the link in the show notes. So I've really appreciated hearing all this. It's kind of inspiring and kind of gets me excited and thinking about, maybe is that something we should pursue? But I'd have to imagine have they all been good experiences? I mean, have you had some tough ones?
Yeah, honestly, I have had really great experience on the Airbnb app. There has been only one or two occasions where I haven't had a good experience. And one was recent, and it wasn't super bad. They had a little kid, and I'm sure they just put, kids being kids, put something on the fireplace, and it melted on the fireplace. So I had to clean the fireplace pretty good. But other than that, I really haven't had a bunch of bad experiences Airbnb-ing or hosting. And I don't know if that's just the, I don't know if me living, because I live kind of close to it, has helped, limit those bad experiences, or just the space in general. Like, it's super cute, it's very elegant, and people want to take care of it, persona type of a thing. I'm very grateful that I haven't had super bad experiences, but they can happen, you know. And there is insurance through the Airbnb app if something does happen bad. And we have, liability insurance, all of that stuff too. But you are protected through the Airbnb app for those events.
Airbnb texts you for liability, or did you take out a separate liability?
I also have liability insurance, but Airbnb also, so say they damage something in the grain bin while they're staying here, or they damage something in your home, you can turn it into the Airbnb app, and then they will provide insurance to cover that.
Okay.
So it is nice to have that extra layer of protection.
Assume, you wouldn't ever plan to use or ever want to use, but it's good that it's there.
Absolutely, for sure. And, just having a sign, like a liability sign, like we're not responsible for injuries that occur, like, we have a hot wire fence, kids getting shocked by the hot wire fence, something like that.
So how close are they to your cattle? And I'm sure that depends on the time of the year, but just give me a little bit of a gauge on that.
Yeah, typically they're like 50 feet away. They're in our backyard, and most of the time, like if there's people in the grain bin, the cows all come up because they're very friendly. They want to know what's going on. Why are somebody? And they love watching the turkeys and the chickens in the backyard at night. So they're usually right there, and it creates for a pretty cool experience for the Airbnb guests, because they can watch the cattle and see this whole crazy shenanigans going on with the chickens and the turkeys and the cattle. But yeah, they're always right there.
So it sounds like you are kind of solely in charge of the Airbnb experience, but you also mentioned a wedding venue. Do you have more of a team that helps with that, or do you take a lot of that on yourself too?
No, I take the wedding venue's all my responsibility. So
do you have kind of a quota of how many weddings you want to do per year? Because I'd imagine that would really cut into your time if you were booked the whole summer and fall.
For sure. And it does. And that's why, like, we've actually slowed down on weddings a lot, just because we prefer the Airbnb guests versus the weddings. The weddings are a lot of work. They take a lot of time. It ties up your weekends. And we just have kind of tailored away from the weddings, and we really utilize this space more for the community and community events now than what we do for weddings. So when I first started, we did, like a wedding every month, and that was when I was young and maybe had more. I'm still young, but I had more ambition back then, where I didn't have kids and a husband to take care of, and I could work on the weekends, and I didn't have anything else to do. Mm-hmm. So, we've definitely slowed down on the wedding part of it, and mainly are focusing on the Airbnb experience and community events now.
So with the weddings, do you also do all the decorating, or what all do you do for the wedding? Or do you just kind of say, here's the space, here's how much it is, you're in charge of everything else?
That is my business model, because I'm too busy to decorate and set up and all of that stuff. It's very much, here's the space, there's a rental fee, here's your space, you do with it what you want. Obviously have rules like no glass and that kind of stuff, but I don't help you set up, I don't help you tear down. It must be exactly how you rented it prior to, or better. So I just set it up very much like I said, and it depends on the person. If you want to create a wedding venue and you're like into that kind of stuff of decorating and setting up and have the time to do that, but I just didn't have the time or the capacity. Like, that's not my strong suit. So it's very much, the building is yours, here's the rental fee, you can do what you want with it.
So was it easy to convince your parents to take this on? Because I can't imagine every family member, at least I think about my family and saying, oh, I want to have, strangers on the place for, this or that. I can't imagine them fully being on board with me saying that. So what was it like to convince your parents or anyone else on the operation that this was going to be your alternative revenue or your salary?
For sure. My dad would told me I was crazy. I mean, he's very old man, gruff, very kind of your straight shooter, doesn't like change, per se, not really with the times or the social media stuff or anything like that. So he told me I was crazy, and he was like, that's never going to work. And I was like, oh, watch me. And it's funny how like sometimes when people tell you no, and then you're like, oh, prove you wrong type of a thing. But then something beautiful births out of that. And that was very much the case with the MC Bar Meat Co. just because it's not traditional marketing. It's not per se like taking things to the grain elevator, taking them to the sale barn, or selling them on Superior. It's very much different marketing. It's a lot more personalized marketing. It's a lot more branding. But it worked. And now my dad is like, I never thought that stinking thing would be so busy, because every time I call him, or, I'm working on the grain bin, doing something with the grain bin, he's like, what, again? And I was like, yeah. So it's been pretty crazy to see, the success that I never thought I would have, especially with being how remote I am. And the cool part, I think, with all of this, actions always speak louder than words. So I could sit there and tell him, but if I didn't do any of the work, it wouldn't have mattered. So just having different guests come through, now they have started renting out my grandma's house. My grandma passed away a couple years ago, and they remodeled it, and now they're renting out my grandma's house. And that thing is booked 2 out of the 4 weeks of a month, It's a lot different space than the grain bin, so they get a lot more long-term rentals per se. Different people here working on projects for the feed yards or dairies or wind farms or just different things like that. So it's been really cool to see the progression of, oh, it's not going to work, to now they have 2 Airbnbs on there with what they're doing too. So it's kind of neat.
That is really cool. And we kind of skipped over this, but on your operation, is it primarily just you and your parents working?
Yes, it is. So, and we'll, like, my sister will help whenever we need help with working calves or moving cattle or something like that. But mainly the day-to-day operations are my parents and me, or me and my dad mainly. And my mom's helped more now that her business in town has kind of slowed down and she's kind of gearing up for retirement. So she's helping more on the operation, the day-to-day stuff, which has allowed me to kind of facilitate more for the grain bin and really ramp it up per se and create more value with it. So it's been a good change, nice change.
I think farmers and ranchers need to be asking themselves to determine if this is an enterprise they should really commit to.
Yeah, the biggest thing too is looking at your resources. If you have an old building that's falling down or whatever, that might not be your ideal building. But say you get a yurt or, there's all kinds of crazy things that people love the experience. And even a teepee. I don't know if you've ever searched teepees for Airbnbs, but they are a hot commodity on Airbnb. You just put up a teepee in the pasture and people will go nuts over it. I mean, there are so many different things. And I think we sometimes get so tunnel vision within the agriculture industry that we don't think about all the resources we have and just how you can utilize them in different ways to make extra income. Because we all know margins are tight, record high inputs for 2024 and now going into 2025. Every little bit counts. And it's like the Airbnb is my salary and I can still do what I love every day, take care of the cattle, build fence, whatever I need to do, and still host people on our operation. So, and this is just like a caveat, more of a the business side of it. But the Airbnb, I was able to buy 2 quarters of ground when I moved home. So the Airbnb are on my 2 quarters, and that's kind of also how it's separate from the rest of the farming and ranching stuff. And I kept it that way mainly just for the liability. Like it's in its own little parcel. So, and I think it's a smart business move, just because things happen, cows get out, whatever, people get hurt. I haven't had any of that, knock on wood, but just protecting yourself. Like I always call it the oh shit method, like, oh shit, this happened,
Mm-hmm.
So always be prepared no matter what life throws at you.
So then, did you create a separate business name and entity for the Airbnb and wedding venue?
Yes, it's in its own LLC.
Well, Lettie, is there anything else you want to add or share before we wrap up today?
If anybody ever has any questions or wants to brainstorm different ideas, like I am all here for it. So I love innovating. I think innovating kind of runs in my family, and I think I got that dose with the Airbnb. So
Well, if anyone out there listening wants to connect with Lettie or see some of the resources and guides that she has, I will include her social media down in the show notes so that way you can connect with her there. But after that, everyone just keep an open mind and remember that alternative revenue might already be right there for you. You might just have to get a little creative. So happy ranching, folks, and we will catch you on the next one.